Welcome to our LinkedIn Live podcast, American Perspectives in the Era of Compound Volatility. I'm Matt Kramer, KPMG's Products Line of Business Leader, and I'll be the MC for our discussion today. So KPMG recently issued the findings from our first ever KPMG American Perspective Survey, which assessed the views of 1,100 Americans, consumers and workers, and we wanted to understand their outlook on their personal financial situation, the U.S. economy, consumer shopping behaviors and preferences, and we were interested to learn their views on emerging trends and changes shaping their experiences in retail, energy, healthcare, banking, and technology. Our perspectives today will address the compound volatility being experienced by Americans, including near-term risks like geopolitical, sticky inflation, and technology disruption, but also look at longer-term structural changes, including energy transition, evolving changes in healthcare, and the broader economy. I'm so excited to have Angie and Kristen here with me today, and I'd like each of you to do a quick introduction, maybe starting with Angie first.
Thanks, Matt. I'm Angie Gilding. I'm KPMG's U.S. Sector Lead for Energy.
And I'm Kristen Pothier. I am KPMG's Sector Lead for Life Sciences and Healthcare.
Awesome. Thanks for being here and really excited about the conversation today. We're going to start with the first topic, which is personal financial situation and growth prospects. And throughout the dialogue today, feel free to drop in questions. We'll try to save time at the end to get those. And if not, we'll certainly follow up with you afterwards. But maybe a little bit of data. So Americans are optimistic about their personal financial situation over the next year. 54% in our survey optimistic versus 24% not optimistic, but certainly skeptical about the growth prospects of the U.S. economy. Only 37% optimistic versus 38% not optimistic. Angie, I'm going to start with you. So even with sticky inflation, it seems Americans are optimistic about their personal financial situation. What do you think's driving that?
Well, first of all, Matt, I love the optimism of Americans. I think we're an optimistic country. But I think what's driving that is perhaps two things. One, during COVID, we did see Americans continuing to save. So we had Americans build up a set of savings. Now, that is starting to dwindle, but there was an aspect of savings that were going on during COVID that we're getting a subsequent benefit from. And the second thing is we're continuing to see a pretty strong job market. So I think Americans are seeing the fact that there is a demand for their labor, for their skills going forward. And so I think that's also playing into the optimism.
Yeah, what a jobs report, the most recent, impressive. Kristen, we also have a very interesting dynamic. We had two surveys, not just one, and we had a U.S. CEO survey. Not surprising, CEOs are optimistic, but 87% of CEOs were confident in the growth prospects of the domestic economy. But in our survey, only 27% of Americans were optimistic about the domestic economy. And wanted your thoughts about that significant gap.
Yeah, it's a gap that's unfortunate, but the reality of living in a CEO world versus a basic American world. And so when you think about our CEOs, their job is to motivate and to fuel all of their workers and all of the economy, honestly, to bring innovation to life, to in life sciences, to bring drugs to life, to bring cures to patients. And so they have to have that optimism, and they also have the ability to really see all of what they have at their disposal to create that energy and that drive and that momentum. Whereas an everyday American is trying to feed their family, take care of their, elderly parents, make sure that their kids get off to school, make sure their kids' colleges are paid for. And I think it's, as Angie said, it's an optimism that we have in America, but we also have a cautious optimism that I think that we're dealing with right now.
Yeah, so interesting. I think CEOs are truly worked through a lot in the last 2 to 3 years. So maybe they feel like they can for sure overcome anything they're facing as headwinds now. But maybe Americans are thinking this is going to be a little bit longer term recovery. So it's going to be very fun to watch. But another interesting data point, 65% of Americans and 60% of those over 200,000 expect to do more discount shopping. And I've spent a lot of time with consumer and retail clients, and I do believe There's structural changes that consumers have made really over the last couple of years. They've gotten really sharp with how they do their personal budget, how they spend their money. And I think they're really finding ways with high inflation to find discounted goods or private label brands in certain categories that they're much more willing to make a permanent change. So that's certainly something that I think has been an evolution over a couple of years. But maybe, Angie, any reaction to that? It seems like a big number, 65% more discount shopping.
Yeah, I think that's not surprising to me. I happen to live in a household where I've got multiple generations in our household, and utilizing discount shopping is also becoming a cool thing to do. I think as our society transitions to a more sustainable mindset, looking at discounting shopping and being able to buy secondhand and vintage, as well as making good use of your economic dollars, is something that more and more Americans are really starting to lean towards.
Yeah, and I think it again goes more towards that cautious optimism that we have, having lived through COVID and being told, oh, it will just be something that we'll have to deal with for 2 weeks, which then turned into 2 years and really did affect a number of people's livelihood and whether or not they could send their kids to college or whether or not they could even go to their jobs or feed their families. Even those that have fully recovered look back on that and say, maybe I'll save better, maybe I'll spend smarter just in case there is another something else that's going to hit us over the head in the coming years.
Exactly. Great insights. Let's move to topic 2. So the growth of digital technologies and Gen AI. And this kind of surprised me, some high percentages here. I think we've gotten over the hump of Gen AI is just here to take my job. And Americans are realizing it's much more than that. So Americans seem to be more and more comfortable experimenting with Gen AI in their personal lives, 40%, and in the workplace, 41%. So happening, in their 360-degree daily lives. Consumers are expecting Gen AI to be an integral part of certainly their favorite brands. So they're expecting companies to adjust, but also to create a better customer experience. But the confidence is not across the board. So we're going to jump into a couple of areas. Kristen, starting with you in healthcare, more than 50% believe Gen AI will deliver healthcare benefits by improving responses to questions, scheduling appointments, and refilling prescriptions. I think patients have probably been waiting for this change, but it's not confidence across the board through the entire patient experience. So would love your perspectives on the data you saw in the survey.
Yeah, absolutely. So, a full half of us really love the idea of Gen AI and love the idea of being able to be bumped up on a wait list for a dermatology appointment at the very next day because we have AI-enabled technologies to link all of our medical records together and also link in scheduling and ordering in a very different way than we've seen before in the medical system anyway. We've seen it in consumer for quite some time, but we're transitioning it into the medical system now. And patients are very excited about that. It's more convenient for them. And it also is something they understand. Whereas when they are scared and they have a diagnosis that they might not understand, whether it be a cancer diagnosis or a cardiovascular diagnosis, they want to see a person. They want to have a doctor to still be able to look at them and talk with them and explain to them. It's less about the bots. It's less about AI and more about that patient-to-patient interaction. I think I will also say that we in the medical community are still testing how AI can help us in treatment decision-making, treatment algorithms, and really moving forward into diagnosis in creating different drug regimens for patients. It's still in progress. And so, of course, we're going to have about a third of people that are comfortable with it now, but the rest of it is going to have to wait.
Very sensitive area. I mean, that's going to take some time to get over that, but exciting that it's being worked on and it's going to mature over time. That's excellent. And Angie, really interested in one of these trends in energy. We're starting to see, really the realization that large tech companies, and they're actually acting on this, that energy is the future in the Gen AI world. So what trends are you seeing emerge in energy?
Yeah, I think there's 2 key trends that are important to highlight. The first one is we've only really scratched the surface. And it's how do you use Gen AI in this distributed energy system that we're moving towards from an energy transition. So if you think about if a consumer has power to their household coming from the grid, your traditional wires from a power utility company, you may have solar panels on your roof that are getting solar power during the day. You may have a battery storage in your garage that's storing some of that power. And the whole decision analysis around when do I pull from what source? What do I put back to the grid? What do I put in the battery? When do I charge my EV as those increase over time? That whole decision analysis, not only just for an individual consumer, but also for our power companies that are dealing with multiple sources now of energy coming in. That requires very complex and real-time analysis and decision making. And the only way you can really do that is through Gen AI. So that is one key point going forward. The second component, as Gen AI and these technologies increase over time, these require supercomputers. These require a number of data centers that are getting built to support this demand. And so those are very large sources, require a lot of a power going forward. And so what we're going to see here in the US, particularly as the energy demand from electricity has pretty much been flat for the past several years, we're going to see a massive increase in just overall power needs to support the ability to run the computers around this Gen AI.
That's amazing. The news articles pop up wherever you live. There's a new data center by one of the big tech companies being built. It's incredible. But let's get into topic 3. And Angie, this is diving in the energy transition, because I think there's kind of two sides to that coin that you just described, right? It's so if you move beyond Gen AI, people are also navigating the transition to a low carbon economy, and consumers seem to want more renewable energy, at least in our survey data, but they're still uncertain about those alternative energy sources. So what are you seeing in the data and in the industry overall?
Yeah, it's interesting. When we ask the question in terms of your power consumption, what consumers are most comfortable with, they came back and said, overwhelmingly majority are most comfortable with renewables and fossil fuels. So 69% were most comfortable with renewables and 41% with fossil fuels. They're less comfortable with the technologies they don't know or they have fears on. Nuclear, for instance, we had about a third of our respondents feel comfortable with it, a third that knew nothing, didn't know enough about it, and a third that weren't comfortable with it. With hydrogen, what we saw was about 45% of the respondents weren't knowledgeable enough to feel comfortable even knowing about the benefits of hydrogen. So I think there's a lot of education that needs to occur as we move towards this energy transition. We see it as a mosaic of solutions. It's not just one particular technology. And so as we evolve over time, it's going to be really important to educate the consumers on these different demands.
That's a great point. I mean, the companies are going to get there, right? But they've got to bring, Americans and consumers on the learning curve with them. So that's a super important part of that climate transition. Angie, I really thought this was one of the very interesting data points in the survey, but it appears Americans are really not there yet on EVs. Only 1/5, 21% of the people surveyed indicated they would purchase an electric vehicle over gas or hybrid. And this is with all of the pricing and features the same. So what do you read into that low number?
Yeah, this outcome is getting a lot of attention. You can look at it two ways. Currently, the EV market is about 6 or 7% right now. So you can say there's a big upside between 6 to 7% going up to 21%. So there's an upside there. Or you can look at it and say, if the desire is to get to a net zero and our economy, we need in the US 50% of EV uptakes, we have a significant gap. So there's two sides of the coin to look at. I wasn't overly surprised personally, because I think we've got a series of challenges to navigate through. The first is being reliability of the EVs themselves. What we have seen, and we've seen this in some of the traditional automakers as they release EVs, it's not as simple, Matt, as switching out an internal combustible engine with a battery. These are machines and automobiles that are almost supercomputers driving that you're driving. And so the software around computing how long you have for a charge, when you need to stop, where you need to stop, how long you need to charge, that reliability that we've seen in some of the EVs has frankly been poor. And I think that's hurt the EV companies and the EV story. So that's one challenge. The second one is around what we call range anxiety. So do I have a battery capacity that will allow me to travel on longer trips if I desire? That's something that we've seen batteries increase pretty significantly over time. And I think that will continue to increase. But the other aspect around range anxiety is when I need to charge, is there a charging station that's available, that's working, and that I know I can get a charge and I won't be stranded? And so that's something that's still evolving as consumers need to stop and get charges. They need to know that these locations are there and they're working. And we're seeing that the results really differ. I think it's important to add across regions. So the West Coast is much more comfortable with EVs and hybrids than you see people in middle America be. And I think a lot of that, again, has to do with that charging infrastructure and the ability to get a charge and get your car operational when you need it.
I mean, it truly is that level of carefulness and confidence in the whole premise, right? Even when you think about breaking down on the side of a road and having to walk to a gas station and then walk back with the gas, you can do that. There's an understanding of that, especially our boomers and our Gen Xers actually remember that, right? Whereas nowadays, how do you can't push your car to the charging station. You might not know where the charging station is. And that you can imagine that invokes a little bit of fear in some of the areas, especially in the country that couldn't afford it in the past as well.
You're so right, Kristen. And I think also, too, there's an aspect, we talked a bit about education of consumers around the different sources of energy. I think there's an education, too, about the features of EVs. I live in Houston, Texas, where it gets very hot in the summer. One of the features with an EV is you can set your car to maintain it at a consistent climate. So I never get in my car now in a hot car. That's a feature that you don't have with a internal combustible engine that I'm not sure consumers are really aware of some of these other features that may exist. So there's an opportunity to educate.
Yeah, that theme continues, and I think everybody hopes the infrastructure catches up to the demand that's coming most likely. Let's move. We have a couple of quick remaining topics, and let's move to the next one, Kristen. GLP-1s in healthcare, and clearly GLP-1s have almost been on the same hype cycle as what we talked about with Gen AI, and there's a strong reaction in this survey as being important to Americans personally. First, can you start by explaining GLP-1s and also the broader category? But then, as I know you know all about this, but then share what you saw in the survey data related to it.
Yeah, and it truly is a hype cycle that is also pushed by Whoopi Goldberg and the Kardashians and any of our celebrities that have gotten on this bandwagon to talk about GLP-1s. And so GLP-1, just to get a little bit sciencey on all of you, stands for glucagon-like peptide. And it is a drug that's an injectable drug and set of drugs that's used to treat to control blood sugar levels in diabetics. That's how it was developed. And one of the side effects of it when it was originally developed was drastic and very effective weight loss. And so now it is being used also in the obesity category and helping patients drop weight and maintain weight with patients with obesity. Now, that said, all of that comes also with a higher price tag than typical diet drugs. It also is an injectable, so it's a little bit different than just taking a pill. And what we've seen is the hype around it has then translated over the years and just even over the past couple of years into the general population. So people that maybe not even obese and just want to drop a few pounds and don't really want to go to the gym or can't go to the gym or don't want to stop eating their Twinkies or whatever it happens to be, want to just take care of it with a GLP-1. That's not how the drug was designed, and that's not how the drug was priced, and that's not how we really want to maintain our patients. We have a lot of different ways to maintain our patients and to help our patients that need weight loss that isn't as drastic, or control of blood sugar levels that isn't as drastic as what we see with diabetic populations or with obese populations. And so again, we're heading into a level of that kind of innovation education that, Angie just mentioned with EVs. I'm going to mention here with the newest types of drugs, whether it be GLP-1s or other types of drugs that we're seeing, that we really need to educate our populations on what's appropriate to be taking and what's not necessarily the most appropriate thing to be taking when you're in this class of drugs.
Awesome. A lot of great detail there. Thanks, Kristen. Let's end with a fun question. And I've entitled this Shopping Anyone. We know all generations are hunting for discounts. We heard that earlier, 65%. But consumers also told us 33% plan to do more in-person shopping. And Gen Z is leading that trend of willingness to shop in person, along with boomers. But then they're also leading the category of shopping on social media. 31% of Gen Z more than willing to point and click in social media to make purchases versus 12% of all categories. And on shopping with sustainability in mind, Gen Z is 31% more willing to do that than the rest of the population at 20%. So with those data points in mind, don't have to address those specific data points, but how will your shopping behaviors change in the year ahead? Start with you, Angie, on this one.
Well, I mentioned I had multiple generations in my household. So I've got a household full of teenagers. The last probably 10 purchases I've made has all been through social media links that my daughter has sent me through Instagram, through some of her other social media. So I'm getting a real-time schooling in this, and this is how they're shopping. They're seeing influencers on social media model the clothing, the link to where to purchase, and that's how they're buying these days. So I'm certainly feeling it firsthand.
I feel the same way, quite honestly, because I also have teenagers in the house, and one of them's going to college in the fall, and every single thing we have bought for her has been online. She has picked it. She has curated the mattress topper, the XL sheets, everything like that has gone through our favorite online stores rather than going to an old fashioned Walmart or something like that of the past. So it's really interesting to see that dynamic as we move forward. I also wanted to address something back on the GLP-1s because we knew that would be very exciting to talk about. There's a question of whether or not the pricing will remain at a premium for GLP-1s. And we don't expect that over the years. As GLP-1s are tested in more populations, that they get safer to use, and we titrate the dosing in a way that is allowable for all the large population, we expect also that there will be pricing changes that go along with it. But for the future right this minute, we're still looking at this from a diabetic and obese population first, and being able to work with that population, and the pricing is the pricing in order to be able to make that population whole.
Excellent. Thanks for grabbing that, Kristen. This has been such a blast. Thanks for your guys' insights. Thanks for everybody for joining this American Perspectives webcast and our podcast. And we look forward to doing this again very soon, but have a great rest of your day. Thank you.